pun, I don't know if y'all know this because you just met me, but my favorite pun is what the future, right? Like what the future, how do I navigate this stuff? There's a lot of things happening in the world right now. That's why we're at home, right? And thinking about there's a lot of uncertainty, like in forestry, for example. What if like the government jobs might be in flux right now because of some of the changes that are happening, but that could change at any moment, right? And so our relationships are things that are continue to build over time, and it's so important that we invest in that social capital to keep moving forward. So we're going to be talking about like, okay, and like leveraging and ew, it sometimes feels icky, but we're going to be talking about helping you figure out what you're interested in, and just some of the career questions that you might have right now, because that's what's most important. So we're going to come back to Sparks of Joy Storying, and I want to start with this piece. So for each of you, you're going to have a prompt for discussion after this with your professor. So you all will already get it done, which is awesome. But if you get out a piece of paper or you type on a Google Doc, I won't know. But I want you to answer these 3 questions, okay? So like, what is your next career step or transition? Like, is it, I need to make a resume, or I need to find an internship, or I need to figure out what the heck I like, okay? That's totally fine. Or grad school, or to not grad school. But I want you to write down, what is your next career step or transition? Okay? And then fears, questions, or needs regarding that transition, and then who you turn to advice. So yeah, just those 3 prompts. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. I'll pause the recording so they're not just watching you write things down. But take some time, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So yeah, finding connections. Let's talk about that, because the game is rigged, right? And I don't think we talk about that enough. Finding a job is a game, and the game is rigged because we don't all play by the same rules, right? So for example, Ethan, I loved that you talked about working with your dad, because that's such a great way to start, right? Like, is building off of who you already know and then going from there. However, like if it was that exact same situation with me, my dad never graduated high school, right? And so he doesn't have the same level of like educational resources, or he graduated high school but didn't go to college. So like he doesn't work in the oil industry, or an industry that, like, I work in higher education. He would not have any connections within that industry, right? And so each of us has different levels of like connections already built in or not. And we have to figure out what the rules of the game are so we can figure out where we position ourselves to play the game. And you don't have to lose yourself in that process. I'm a big believer in that. But with all those rules, eventually, once you get into the game, I want you all to change it, right? Like, how do I like navigate this gross, like there's a lot of bias in the industries. There's a lot of things that we can't control. Has anybody here played the game of life? Like where you roll the dice and you don't, yeah, it's just like that sometimes, and it's so gross. So I want to make it less icky by helping you understand, like, what are some of the skills that you already have? Does anybody here feel like they struggle talking about themselves? Like a little bit? Okay, cool.
Yes, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Okay. So, and then if I don't know how to talk about myself, how the heck am I supposed to convince someone else to invest in me as a mentor, right? Or offer opportunities. So figuring out that I do have worth and how to talk about that is one of the most valuable things you can ever do. And that's what I'm here to help you do. My job is literally storytelling, okay? So with all that, some brief notes as well, because you brought up some good points about like internships and volunteering. They're not hiring right now. In particular, so in the hospitality industry or other event planning roles, they're like right now, it's very uncertain, right? But there are other industries that actually are skyrocketing right now. So for example, obviously healthcare, but government positions are growing significantly. And I know the arts are still just as competitive as they were before, for sure. But figuring out, how do I stand out if I'm not going to do an in-person interview, right? How do I make myself more marketable so that I can be more competitive in addition to gaining experience? And one of those things is making a baller LinkedIn profile, y'all. Like getting that digital presence up to snuff so that you feel like it's good to go. So like I said, with that, your major doesn't determine the rest of your life. I have a theater major in med school. So know that if you're curious about a different industry, go for that internship, boo. Like, let them tell you no. Like, get to know people there to see if that's something you actually want to explore. A lot of you are sophomores. The world is your oyster. It's going to be okay. It's okay to have permission slips to explore. The first job you get after undergrad is not the last or best job you're ever gonna have. I really hope not. Because, whoo, right? Like, that was the only job you ever had. And your job doesn't determine your worth as a person. Like how much you make necessarily. It's just every person has their own needs, and that includes salary, right? Like, what do I need to pay my bills? What do I need if I have to support a family? Do I need an environment where my identity is welcomed? Everybody's search is unique and comparison is futile. So don't even bother. Do any of you feel like you're comparing to some of your friends who have internships or are like doing the hustle? No? Okay.
No, because my friends are all in the complete opposite field as me. So I'm like, you do you.
Yay! Okay, because usually when again, liberal arts students, usually I talk to them, I'm like, how many of you have been comparing yourself to your school of business friends? And they're like, I won't admit it. And I go, okay. So it's a totally different field. They have totally different hiring trends. And each of you are in unique fields. So that's a good thing to pay attention to. Okay. So anyway, just some myth busting. Want to put that out there. If you feel when you see a position description, if you're like, oh, I'm not qualified for that. If you meet 70% of the qualities and skills and competencies in that position description and you're excited about it, 70%, I want you to give them the opportunity to tell you no. Okay? 70%, go for it. I have way too many students who are like, I didn't apply because I wasn't qualified. And I'm like, excuse me, they're looking for a unicorn. Okay? So make sure that when in doubt, go for the application. Cool. Okay, if nothing else, at least you know that. Okay. So with that in mind, job search tips. Why do you think this is what Forbes recommends for how you should split your time when you're looking for a job or an internship?
I feel like most of the time, if you got someone inside the like company, for example, like you want to get into and it's a good word for you, then they'll definitely like look into your resume, look into you more.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Even thinking about how you all look for recommendations for things. Maybe because I just moved Fort Collins, right? So if I'm looking for a hairdresser, yeah, I'm going to look at Yelp, but do you think I'm going to be talking to my friends to be like, boo, where do you go? Yeah, and that's going to hold a lot more weight than this like 5-star review of something, because that's that personal capital. And so that's why we really need to talk about networking. Why do you think networking is particularly important right now, though? Like during this economic trend, I'm not allowed to say it, during this period and why we're working from home, why do you think networking is all the more important?
Because it's easy to lose connection during this time when you're not meeting in person.
Yeah, absolutely. What are other reasons? Why would networking be more powerful right now than job searching actively?
Well, someone mentioned it before that a lot of jobs just aren't hiring right now. And so networking, once those jobs become available again, maybe you'd be an option to hire when those become available again.
Heck yes. Okay. So yes, it's that balance of, so right now, at least from what I'm seeing on LinkedIn and talking to some employer relations folks, what we're seeing is that there's a current hiring freeze, but it's definitely temporary. Companies usually set their budgets at the beginning of the year. Now, that fluxes depending on the government, which I know 2 of you are very interested in, and different industries, or grant money, like for the arts management piece. But most companies have their budget set for the beginning of the year. So unless there's a significant revenue loss or change, they still have those positions available. It just might not be yet because they're pausing to be like, well, we're in shock. Let's just wait and see what happens for a second. So it doesn't mean that there won't ever be jobs. It just means right now there might be a freeze, and this is the perfect time to reach out and say, hi, I just want to get to know you better. And also, is there anything I can do for you? Right? Like, I want to learn more about the industry. Can you tell me more? I'm really excited to get to know you better. And we'll talk about like logistically what that means, because you can't get coffee with the, like you could get coffee, like I could drink right now, you know, be like, woo, hey. But that's a totally valid thing to do in the interim. Okay. And for folks who are still getting comfortable with an online environment, this is a great time to practice doing that face-to-face, like Skype interviews and stuff like that. And we can talk about some resources for prepping for that, because I'm super awkward, and it's only because the last week that I got better practice with this. Okay, awesome. All right, so with that being said, we're gonna do some tactical stuff now. So this isn't just like some slides, but how many of you have been on Handshake before? Yeah? Oh, okay, so if you've been on Handshake, Chris, what is Handshake?
So I signed up for it, and basically it just sends me like all these different jobs, whether it be intern opportunities, volunteers, or full-time or part-time seasonal work. And you basically pick your respective field, and it just gives you things that fit within that realm.
Yes, absolutely. So Handshake is CSU's online platform for employers to connect with students. So whenever an employer calls me and they're like, I want to hire liberal arts students, I go, great, go post on Handshake. So folks who are directly looking for you all post on there. Now, I've worked at a few institutions with Handshake, and CSU in particular, because it's Fort Collins and pretty rural, employers are really active on there. So I highly encourage you to keep checking that out. And there are still dozens of postings that are still being sent to us daily. So Handshake is still going to be your best bet when you're starting to look for opportunities now and post working remotely and other things. So always start with Handshake if you're searching. On Handshake, you can also make a profile. So you are actually, I think it was 60% more likely to be seen by a recruiter who's on Handshake if you have a filled in profile. So please do that. And I, after this session, I'm going to be sending these slides to your professor to post them. So that way you can definitely, like, all these are links, and we're going to walk through these websites, but I just wanted to talk through them first. Okay. For those of you who are looking for remote work, so if you're like, how do I do that? What? FlexJobs is amazing. So it's a flexjobs.com. And if you're like, I just need a job right now, like quick cash, or there's tons of opportunities, other links that I can send you, but FlexJobs for remote work is going to be alive and well. So I highly recommend you check that out. And then lastly, of course, LinkedIn, which we're gonna dive into together. What I hope is posted already on your Canvas shell are some very basic walkthroughs of LinkedIn, and we're going to do that together now. But you all are savvy. I know that you know how to figure out a profile and do different things with it. Ooh, 10. All right, so check out our website. It totally got a facelift, but it says like, we've gone virtual, and it's super easy to navigate. So this is all the information you'll need from us, but on that main page, it'll walk you through just how to, so for example, for that LinkedIn piece, or if you're like, I want to do a cover letter, you can do quick career questions for drop-ins, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. That was there before COVID, and now it's just online. So if you go to our website and see this little chat box at the bottom that says chat with us, click on that, and then it'll walk you through, well, I've done it before, so it won't let me, but it walks you through like, sign in for a drop-in, and there's someone at our front desk that walks you through the whole process. Okay, so these are our resources, but if you're like, but what's LinkedIn and how do I do it? Boo, we got you, okay? You can just go over here and search in the search bar, LinkedIn, and bam, look at all this stuff, right? So I already pulled up some of these things like building a great student profile, and honestly, the best thing you can do, so building a profile, this is how you build a LinkedIn profile. It's literally a checklist that's like, this section, do this section, do this. For example, get a good photo. Do not take a selfie or a bathroom picture. I mean it, I've seen it all, okay? So having a good photo is a good idea. A headline that isn't just senior, sophomore, right? So talking about your future self and what you're looking for. But yeah, so LinkedIn is an online social media platform for employers. It's a living, breathing sign that's like, hire me, please. So you have to be aware of your story, right? Like, what are things that you have to offer, and what are things you want to employers to find you for so that they can recruit you for those opportunities. So, like I said, you have a good photo, a headline, a summary. So it just describes like what you're excited about. Again, especially if you don't have a lot of experience yet, this is where you get very clear so you can get more keywords in there of that industry, right? Like forestry. I have no idea what you want to do in forestry, but if it's like forestry, like you would throw that in there like nobody's business. Okay. Experience, that's where you can share things like even on-campus leadership. Obviously, internships and work experience would be standing out the most, but that's where you'll fill that in. Organization, so again, things you're involved in on campus, education, volunteer experience, skills, etc. Okay. Now, again, this is a super basic walkthrough. It explains everything to you, and I trust your abilities. But I want to take this time now to ask, like, do you have any questions in particular about what goes into a LinkedIn profile? And it's okay if you're like, nah.
The main question that I have is, like, this being my first semester here, like, I don't have any academic involvement, especially not now, nor like any experience. So do I just like leave that blank, or?
Great question. Yeah. So at your former institution, were you involved on campus?
Well, my former institution was the military.
The military. Okay, great. The military is experience.
Okay.
Ooh, yes. I'm so glad you asked. Okay, yes. So military experience or volunteering, that's totally valid. And you're totally going to put that on there. And I will follow up after this so that, and again, I hope that you talk to our career specialist because they have resources on how do I talk about my military experience.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh, good question. Yes. I mean, do you think that you gained relevant skills in the military?
Like, yes and no. From like a leadership standpoint, definitely. I was a medic, which doesn't really translate to forestry, but like it's still a very useful skill set. Like I've been to paramedic school and all that, so like even though it's not necessarily pertinent to like the forest as a whole, it still is useful stuff that I know will help me in the long run.
So kind of what we talked about earlier about storytelling, it's absolutely relevant. And obviously, yes, if you had another forestry position, you would talk about that more. But part of what gets us to the next step is getting really clear on where we're going and what prepared us for that step. And you totally were, right? Like I can imagine 5 different ways that being a paramedic or going through paramedic training would be relevant. Even people skills, right? Quick decision making under pressure, having to disseminate technical knowledge, having to make quick decisions, like boo, like oh my gosh, there's so much there. So I'm excited for you to get into that skills section too, which is where you're going to highlight some of those skills in there. But yeah, there's so much to share. So with that in mind, I want you all to spend some time, if you have not created a LinkedIn profile, with that profile checklist, but this page, okay? It's super fun. Honest, I would tell you if it was boring. This is really fun because it's LinkedIn. So each of these videos, if you're just starting out with a profile, they're less than 2 minutes and they walk through how to make a profile, what is LinkedIn? It's a living, breathing resume. And then they have all these resources for how to do these different things. Okay. Now, again, as you're going through it, if you have questions or you're like, this feels silly, or I don't know, reach out to us, like have a drop-in with us so you can just actively work on it in the moment. Cool. Okay. So I know that was a very basic profile overview. I am going to briefly show you my profile just so you can see, again, what one looks like in live form. But this is when I had short hair, oops, but you might not recognize me. But this is a profile where, again, I have my career title because it's relevant to what I'm going into. But if I didn't have that experience, I would say like aspiring something, right? Or like sophomore looking at forestry positions in Colorado, right? Something like that. And then I have like a brief story about my philosophy. Again, some posts that I've made, including job searching amid COVID-19 uncertainty. Other things that I'm not allowed to talk about. Then again, just my experience, like a resume. Okay. So if you don't have a resume, it's a lot easier to just make a resume and then put it onto your LinkedIn, because that's essentially what it is. You're just adding more keywords so that you can find that next step. And like I said, So volunteer experience, skills, recommendations. So for those of you who haven't made a profile, do that first. But once you do, so Ethan, you mentioned that you made one the other day. Who have you connected with so far?
No one.
No one. Okay. So
I just confirmed it. I put a profile picture on. That's about it.
okay, totally fine, right? I mean, you're just getting started. That makes sense. Once you do fill it in, I highly encourage you to start connecting with the people you already know, right? So who are some folks that you would connect with? Like, riff them off.
Bunch of guys in my fraternity. My dad's work friends. I have some connections in Fort Collins from the construction company I'm working with right now.
Good for you. Okay, yeah, so you're starting with friends, we're starting with family. I also encourage you to add your professors, right? Those faculty have some connections. And talking with former supervisors or mentors, like Mary mentioned that you have a mentor that's on campus. Awesome, like connect with all those folks, because on LinkedIn, it's kind of like this might be outdated, but the degrees of Kevin Bacon. So I'm more likely to be able to connect with someone who's connected to someone who's connected to someone, right? So you're trying to build your capital and as many connections as possible so it gets you closer to the ones you really need.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so make sure after you create your content that you connect with all those folks that you already know. Okay, but let's say you did that. Let's say, Ethan, you're like, all right, I took half an hour, I added all these people, now what, right? Maybe you don't have the right people in your corner yet. So that's where this next piece of networking comes in. So like I said, how to communicate effectively, some great samples here. Where did it go? Search results, oh gosh. Oh, here it is, okay. So informational interviews. How many of you heard of informational interviews before? Okay, so it's very basic. It's basically a conversation with someone in an industry you want to get to know better. To be like, hi, what is this like? Or what is your company like? Or what's a day in your life like? Or also, do you have opportunities coming up? So informational interviews are just an introduction to a person that you want to get to know better. So when you're on LinkedIn and talking to strangers, so alumni, for example, which we're going to talk about, you're asking for an informational interview. So we're going to go back to LinkedIn and I'm going to go to the Colorado alumni. So go to this section and you go to Colorado, oops, if I can spell, Colorado State University. State University, there it is. That's where you go to school. And then if you scroll down, on the left-hand side, it says alumni. So we're going to click on that. And right now, there are 186,030 alumni on LinkedIn, right? So I hope you can find at least one person that you find interesting that you want to connect with, right? So you can filter this out by a lot of different things. So for example, so a lot of you are in Colorado right now. So I'm going to say Greater Denver area or Fort Collins, or we can search by industry up here. So forestry. Let's see what happens. Ooh, okay. You can also, I'm going to move this over here. You can also, if you click next, you can search by what they do. So like, what are job functions that they're doing? Oh, military and protective services. Interesting. Or what they studied, right? Forestry. You can narrow by major, you can narrow by what they do. And then look at all these folks. Now, again, I don't know a lot of forestry folks. Like that's not in the majority of my industries. So that's why I can't connect with these people directly very easily. But as you build your connections, it's a lot easier, right? So if I find, let me find forestry consultant. I'm like, oh my gosh, Wayne, your job looks so cool. I want to know how you got to where you were. I'd be like, hey, Wayne, what's up? And I can scroll through Wayne's profile to say, how did he get to where Wayne is? Like, how did he get there? What is he doing? What are different skills that Wayne has, right? So if you're feeling stuck on what content to put on yours, look at people in your industry to say, ooh, maybe I could put that skill on mine, ooh, and build that content. But you're like, okay, but I want to hang out with Wayne. Like I want to do a virtual coffee chat with Wayne because Wayne needs to know who I am. Wayne is connected somehow. Again, probably not because Wayne teaches at CSU, but just in case, right? So I'm going to click more and then this connect button. And under connect, I'm going to click add a note. And adding a note, right? So what do you think Wayne would need to know in order, so it's not just, hey, I'm a random person, right? Like what would Wayne need to know in order, like what are you asking Wayne? What would you include?
I don't know, maybe just like introducing yourself, saying what you're studying and what your prospective job field is. You're like, hey, so you're a forestry consultant trying to get into this business as well. What would you do?
Right. Right. So you can obviously write a more formal message, but yes. So you'd say, hello, I found your profile through CSU alumni. And I'm really interested, I'm a senior studying forestry and I'm really interested in what you do. Would you have time for a brief phone call or Zoom so I could talk to you more about it? Thank you. That's it. Right? And then you send the invitation and you may or may not ever hear back from that person. I know that's the icky part, right? So that's why you have to reach out to more than one person, okay? How many of you have ignored a DM, right? Like we've all been there, it's okay. But we have permission slips to reach out to people because let's say that you were a current student and I'm a prospective student at CSU, right? I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about CSU. If I reach out to you to say, hey, Jenna, I wanna learn more about music at CSU. Can you tell me about it? What would your reaction be?
I don't know. I feel like that would be like a fine response to just like start talking about what I do and then that connection's made. So
Yeah. So you're not like, oh, ew, why would you ever ask me that, right? You're
No.
excited to talk about yourself or share your story. So it's okay to ask to have that conversation. If you just straight up email them saying, can I get a job? That's not appropriate, right? So that's why it's okay to build that relationship and get to know them better. Okay. So feeling good on how to use CSU alumni in that platform, like clicking through and filtering out some stuff. Okay, awesome. And again, you can always go back and rewatch this video, but it's all in here too. So if you're wondering like, how do I do that? Or what's going on? We've got the resources. Okay, so all that said, these are links to different things. Also, I want you to pay attention because at the end of April, we're going to have some really cool employer engagement opportunities. So we're figuring it out as a career center, so stay tuned, but just look out for marketing for those kind of events because you are not alone. We're not just like being like, okay, bye, and going online. Okay, with that being said, this is the last step. Are there any other questions about LinkedIn or things that you're wondering about? How many of you are going to actually go make a profile?
We have to.
Yeah, it's an assignment.
Yay! Okay, cool. So how many of you are going to pass your class then? Woo! Right? Okay. So you're going to make that LinkedIn. And I hope you use that checklist if it's helpful. But here's some other action steps that, again, that we kind of talked about, but might be helpful for you. So make a LinkedIn. All of you are going to do that already then. So but I want you to think about what's one thing you can do by next Friday or by Sunday, right? Because if we keep putting it on the back burner, it won't happen. And I think structure is really helpful when I go online because otherwise I'm like, time is just a concept. What's happening? So maybe make a task a week that works for you of like, ooh, now I'm going to reach out to 3 people. Or I'm going to, like Ethan said, I'm going to check in with my connections already and be like, hey guys, how's it going? Like, what's up? How are you doing? So there's lots of different places that each of you might be in, but take it one step at a time, maybe set goals once a week. And then lastly, here are some resources. What the future? So I'm doing a CLA career coaching webinar series. If you're in the College of Liberal Arts, you're more than welcome to come. If you're not, you're also welcome to come. There's also very specific resources from your colleges, but I just wanted to do this as a shout out. Every Wednesday, I'm going to be doing stuff like this from 3 to 4 p.m. This is the link. I'll make sure you have access to it. If you want to come, there's no pressure. But these are the topics that we're going to be going over in the next 4 weeks. So if you're like, oh, I need to get more in on that, like come on in or tell your friends. But we've got your back. And where could I go to do digital drop-ins? If I want to do career coaching as a digital drop-in, where would I go?
Career Center page, go to chat option.
Yay! Okay, So if there's anything else, I've got your back. I'm going to do a stop share and stop recording.